Hi guys, welcome back.
You ever feel like you're in a power struggle with a kid in your class or one of your own kids? Chances are they're choleric, but if that's the case, we're going to be giving you some do's and don'ts for parenting or forming the choleric child here today. It's actually kicking off a series. We're going to be doing some do's and don'ts for parenting or forming kids that have all those different lead temperaments. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff in the next couple of weeks here on parenting.
Oh my gosh. And guys, people have been asking us for this, so I'm very excited about doing this.
Download our temperaments guide for parents.
Please.
Click in the show notes.
And we have also attached to this podcast a test that you can take for kids in your classroom or kids in your family as a parent or a teacher. So tons of free resources. It's going to be fun.
The podcast is free too. You're welcome. All right. See you guys in there. Hey, folks. Welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. My name is Matt.
And I'm Erin.
And we are your Catholic coaches for the day. In fact, for the next couple of weeks here, because we got a new series that we are starting called Parenting in Your Temperaments.
Yes.
We're going to have the first 4 episodes are going to be the do's and don'ts of parenting the choleric child, the phlegmatic child, all these things. And then we're going to jump into just how to parent better based on your temperament, right? So we can have a little bit more peace and connection in our homes or even in our classrooms. This really applies to teachers as well.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, it's fascinating. I coach a lot of people on, I would say probably the most coaching I do on temperaments is with parents. And what I love about this is understanding today, what we're going to be talking about is parenting your choleric child. So all you phlegmatics, listen up, but also cholerics and sanguines and melancholic. So guys, we have also a lot of free resources that you can use to go along with this series.
Yeah. So our number one accompanying resource for this series is going to be Parenting in Your Temperaments. It's a quick guide. You can go to metanoiacatholic.com or catholiccoaching.com/free resources and down that guide.
Just down it.
Just down it.
Right down the hatch.
Chase it like a nice cold Budweiser. Or you can just click into the show notes. We'll have a link where you can actually go and download that. And so that'll be a great reference for you. We recently shared this actually with an at-home parenting thing that we did here at our house.
Yes.
You want to say something else?
There's one other resource that's actually very monumental for this particular podcast series. And it's you can take a test for your child to find out what their temperament is.
That's all going to be in the same download.
Yes. You can find it all together. Okay. Yes. We recently did this for our school. Avila goes to Donahue Academy here in Ave Maria. And they have these community culture nights. And they're like, you guys could teach us on parenting and your temperaments. And I kind of wish there was one teacher there who is also a trained coach with us. Mary, if you're listening to this, you can.
Hey, what's up, Mary?
Shout out. But she was the only teacher there. And there were like, all the parents were like, the teachers need to learn this too. So if you're a teacher for young kids, even high schoolers, even if you're a professor in college, this is going to be very helpful for you, especially learning about the cholerics. I've coached a lot of parents on their choleric children, and it's funny because I don't need to have a choleric child to know these things. I could be married to a choleric and it's still kind of, I'm not saying that, but
I'm a big choleric child at heart.
But it's funny because if you are that parent who has that choleric child, which by the way, the cholerics are like what, 12% of
it's a small
population.
Percentage.
Yeah, it's the smallest percentage.
But small enough when they show up, you're like, what is going on? Like, why am I having so much trouble? And all of my other friends with their phlegmatic kids are not having the same trouble that I have.
But also teachers.
There's hope.
Teachers will say, I have never had such a difficult child in my classroom.
And it's just like one of the kids. And they're just like, everybody knows who it is.
Yeah. Right. And so don't worry, we have hope for you. Like we're just going to give you some little hacks on the do's and don'ts of helping with choleric. And Matt, you could speak to this.
Well, I mean, just ultimately we want to, as formators, whether you're a parent or a teacher, you just want to be a better guide for these kids as they're growing, right? At the same time, you want to keep your peace in the process, right? And these different temperaments of these kids that show up in our lives that we're responsible for forming, Maria Montessori, the school of the apostle of the child, they have a way of forming us, right? Yes. In some sort of ways. Now we're still the primary formator, but they still have a way of drawing out opportunities for growth. This podcast series is really going to be helping you guys to identify where you might have some opportunities to grow. And even if it's just growing greater compassion or growing some skills and how you can actually approach these kids with these different temperaments, maybe polar opposites of who you are.
Yes.
So that you can create a little bit more influence, more impact, more connection, more peace in that relationship and really fulfill your role of forming them.
All right.
Let's do this.
Let's dive in.
All right. So the choleric child.
Yes.
The do's and don'ts. Let's start with the values. What we're going to do here, folks, with these do's and don'ts podcasts, we're going to start with values. Then we're going to talk about just kind of almost like a little hypothetical trigger situation. We'll give some common ways that child could be triggered. And then the ways that we might commonly react, not in the most helpful ways. So we've got our don'ts, right?
Yes.
And we'll go through some of those don'ts. We'll say why they're a problem. And then we'll also get into the do's that really help that choleric child in this case to experience more of what they're really valuing, what they're seeking, but they're doing it in a way that's actually more virtuous and more mature.
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Cool.
All right. So the choleric child, and Matt, we have a list of these values, but you can add to it since you have like firsthand.
A choleric brain?
Yes.
I'll stick to the script.
Okay. So cholerics really value, and this doesn't go away. This actually is probably more raw in its form when they're children.
Yeah.
So they really value leadership. So they value taking charge and achieving goals. Efficiency. And I want to ask you, I'm going to check in every time and say, is that still true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. They really value efficiency, which they prioritize productivity and effective use of resources.
Yeah. If we were to look at the choleric temperament of the four temperaments, it's a lot of those executor kind of get it done, get things accomplished, have a tangible product complete in your hand, finishing strong versus finishing together even, but that's helpful too.
Yes.
You find that as really an important value for choleric.
Yeah.
Yep.
Courage is another one. They admire boldness and ability to face challenges head on. Competence. They respect skill and capability in themselves and others.
Yeah. And I want to talk courage here. Courage can also often show up as like, we can do hard things. We can do stuff that's arduous. And so we're not deferred by or set back by a challenge or perceived challenge, or even something being physically uncomfortable. Like a choleric can endure a lot of physical discomfort.
In fact, you're kind of motivated by it a little bit.
It actually raises the merit of whatever you're doing.
Yes.
It's like the harder it is, which I've gotten into trouble. I've actually fallen victim to my own, making things harder just for the sake of increasing the merit, but it just
in fact
pisses everybody else off.
That's almost why you became a priest. Why are we doing it this way? That's almost why you became a priest.
Yes. Thank God my spiritual director was just like, Matt, that's terrible. That's a terrible reason to want to be a priest. I thought I should be a priest because it was a more penitential way. I literally said that. And I thought it was a good answer. And my priest was just like, it's a terrible answer. You're not meant to be a priest. Cool.
Okay. So competence, they respect skill and capability in themselves and others. I already talked about that one, but that is actually really helpful for you to know as a parent, right? And then justice, they value fairness and taking actions to set things right.
Yeah. I think that competence is important here because cholerics hate arbitrary rules, right? They want to have that flexibility to be able to choose, and they'll work within the rules, but they're very logical because the rules are there to help them to achieve, to get things done. But if there's something arbitrary, and that arbitrary rule, because I said so, is actually causing them to be less efficient in getting something accomplished, then they really start to kind of push in. They're just like, but why? Like your because I said so is really like costing me quite a bit in terms of my efficiency and my free will. I think this is the best route. Yeah. And they want to have, they're not trying to be obstinate. They're trying to really understand when they ask those why questions.
Yes.
And so the pressure that it puts back on us is if we only have an arbitrary because I said so, that's some of our work to do as parents or as educators to really come up with a good logical reason with some real life consequences. Like, okay, because we do it this way, this is something's gonna happen. Okay. And you can have that reasoned conversation with them.
Yes. Okay. So moving on to the next thing, I'm gonna give you a little story. It is based on a true story. I've changed some of
this is a spooking story. We're going to a lot of hand talking right now. I've
changed some of the details to protect people's identity. But these triggering circumstances for the children, like I said, they're not like fully okay. When I'm talking about children in this particular case, it's a kid who's under the age of reason, right? Mm-hmm. When they're getting older, they have that means to start to ask why on those things, and that also doesn't mean that they're being obstinate, but they don't really have the language for it. So you are seeing it in its rawest form for like the littles, you know?
It doesn't mean don't engage the why questions until they're 7 years old.
That's right.
You know, like you start that early. I mean,
you can actually tell them here's why.
Yeah.
You know?
And because that's a very rich, that young age before the age of reason is really where they're learning by association. So they're pairing, making their associations between I do this and I have this outcome, and it's either good, bad, or useful, right?
As a parent, it's also your job to start to help develop their intellect so that their intellect can actually influence their will, which is a will of steel, like for a choleric. Yes. So, okay. So the reason why these are triggering is because one of these values that we just talked about is absent, and they really understand that this is absent.
It's absent, or they perceive it to be under some sort of attack.
That's right. Thank you. Okay. So once again, leadership, efficiency, courage, competence, justice, just to name a few. There are a lot more for values for the choleric child. But anyway, I was going to pick up Avila one day, and I was watching this little kid who I knew was choleric, very clear. He was friends with Avila. So I knew like 100% choleric. The most choleric child. So I remember I was going to pick up Avila at like the daycare, and I was like watching, they were all coming inside to get ready to go get picked up. Right. And here's this kid who has a will of steel, and I know is choleric, and is not listening to the teacher or the
teacher, the daycare person,
the daycare person. And I watch her catch him because he's running away from her, and she picks him up, and he's hitting her and like losing his mind. I mean, he's like only 3, so whatever. I'm like, ooh, that's not going to work for long-term compliance. Not going to work. But also at a young age, this is a very clear association, a very clear pairing. First of all, I think it's important for choleric kids to know that they're not the strongest one in the room. It doesn't necessarily mean it always has to go to some sort of physical sense. But I mean, it's certainly when there's safety that's involved, you pick up that kid and you bring him in. But knowing that the goal is always to make it very clear what the consequences are with their actions. And if they don't necessarily have the reason to understand completely, the association is what they are capable of making at that age. Yes. Okay. So I'm watching this, and I'm like, well, I probably wouldn't have done that unless he was running out into the street, right? Like there's like, okay, this is a real like issue for his safety. I would probably use more, I want to say psychological warfare, but psychological mechanics.
More motivation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Like leaning into the motivations of it, like knowing the things that this choleric kid values, and how do you use that as a carrot so you don't have to default to the stick? Right.
Okay. So a value that was being triggered here for this particular kid was leadership, like this ability to take charge.
Yeah. Wanting to make his own decisions.
Yes. Making his own decisions. Right. So looking at that situation, I'm just kind of framing this, and then we'll kind of go into maybe what I would have done if I were using these more psychological motivations for this kid. Okay. And the reason why, like you were saying, and I kind of want to just, we'll touch on this later, but the reason why it's helpful to use more of that psychological mechanics with a child, even at that young age, is because of the associations that they're building. And that is our job to do that as parents and teachers, but also because you want internal compliance.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah. So even as a choleric parent, this is something we'll get into more of this when we get into the choleric parent episodes, but it can be very easy to confuse external compliance with winning, right? But really, external compliance, when there's internal rebellion, is not winning. It's not a long-term win, because as soon as the enforcer of external compliance is gone, they're going to go and do whatever they want to do. So we want to make sure that there's an actual interior transformation that's taking place. Why I like using these appealing, motivating them psychologically with the things that they value is it starts to give them language to understand, okay, like this is what I'm really valuing.
Yes.
And so they can see, okay, I'm valuing being a leader. God made me to be a leader. I want to be a leader. But you're teaching them how to really lead well, or you're giving them opportunities to lead. And so even in this situation, a tactic that someone might use is say, okay, it's time to go back inside. All right. So-and-so, will you be the leader? Will you show us how to do it? Will you show us how to safely cross the street? Will you be the person that blazes a trail? Maybe we can race to a certain point. Maybe there's an opportunity to win. They like to win here too, and be, and show how strong they are. Right. Another thought. Okay.
Cool. Let's get into don'ts. What not to do. Okay. If you don't know what temperament is yet, you will after going through these do's and don'ts. You'll start to figure out, okay, my kid is choleric or they're not. So, all right, don'ts. Make sure you avoid excessive control. Over-regulating them can trigger defiance and rebellion. This is exactly what we've been saying. Don't say, I told you so. None of that. Like, just avoid that excessive control. Because I think a lot of people, especially if you have more of that phlegmatic, sanguine, where you're like, I don't get you. I do not understand this child. So you feel like you need to do a standoff with them. No, like that's not going to, we go in the back door with them. Okay. So avoid excessive control. Don't fight with them. They are too good at it. They will win. And Matt, when I was talking about this with Matt's like, no, I will win.
No, and that's the thing. It's just like, are you kidding me? He's a 4-year-old kid. Like, I'm going to win this. But again, it's especially that's a choleric and me getting triggered. So, but we need to be clear on what winning looks like. Because again, if winning looks like external compliance with internal rebellion in the long term, like, it's not really winning. And so, that's just something to be very, very mindful of. I know when I show up and I have that attitude that I'm going to win, I very quickly, as a choleric parent, I very quickly go into a very tyrannical place, and it's an iron fist, and it's just like, okay, I'll let you know what time it is.
Yes.
And like this is, and I go into will crushing behavior.
Yeah.
Which is
not your job as a parent. You're not there to crush their will. You're there to direct it.
Yes.
And I think this is another piece too. When you fight with them, you are setting up opposing teams. You're on opposing teams now together, which is also going against another motivator for choleric. A choleric loves actually together working towards a common goal. Like that's very motivating to you, right? But when you're going at it, you're like, we're on opposing teams. Like when you're fighting back, you're just making that association and being like, we are on opposing teams. If you were to say, okay, how do I help them direct this will a little bit better? Now we're not on opposing teams. Don't dismiss their independence. Their freedom is something that's actually very valuable to them too. Discouraging their initiative can dampen their confidence and motivation. Don't tell them what to do. Give them choices. I'll get into that as the do's, but you're going to want to give them choices versus saying like, this is one thing, this is the only way you can do it. No, just give them like, I don't know, like a bevy of choices.
No, it's not, it's just give them 2 choices. It's like, we can do this or this.
Right.
And again, like know that when you give them choices, you need to be comfortable with both
yes.
of those decisions. So if you're not comfortable with them picking one of the choices you're giving, don't give that one.
Yes.
Right? Don't make that one of the options.
Right. And then finally, I think this is a really big one. It's just, and I think this kind of goes for all of the temperaments, but specifically for cholerics, is reframe your own thinking about them. Like understand how you're judging them. There's so many parents who go, they're just doing this to be difficult.
Yeah. So like the don't here is don't take it personally.
Yes.
Like that's really what we're getting at is, and it can come off that way. But again, if we approach it with curiosity and we're like, okay, they're acting out because there's something that they really value that they feel is threatened. I wonder what that is. And when you start to ask that question, what it does is it helps you to see the good that they're seeking in their acting out. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that we got to condone the behavior. Most likely we don't. But when we start to invite them to get what they want in ways that are more courteous or more virtuous, that's when we're really stepping into our role as a parent.
Yes.
Or the educator. And
when you start to take it personally, now you actually are giving power over to them. Mm-hmm. So you're saying like, you're acting this way, so now I'm feeling this way. It's like, no. We don't want that to be happening.
We don't want the 4-year-old determining our emotions.
Right. So when you take it personally, that's the case. And what does taking it personally sound like? They're doing this to be difficult. This is always has to be a power struggle. Why does everything always have to be a fight? Because you're just taking it on to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a way of reframing. In fact, that's actually been some of my most powerful coaching with coaching parents of cholerics is first, you have to clean up your own judgments of your child, mm-hmm. because these are incredible skills in a really raw form. And they're almost like the stallion that you're trying to break in.
Yep.
And no horse trainer, I don't know a lot about horse training, but I would say no horse trainer would say, I'm going to break this stallion completely down so all it does is just rest in the corner. No, like what that person does is they actually start to direct that stallion and direct that power. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are called to do as parents. Mm-hmm. And teachers, formators of any sort for children.
Redirect.
Okay, so let's go to do's.
The do's for parenting the choleric child or forming the choleric child.
Yes.
I like this one.
Do give them challenges. Provide opportunities to take the lead, to take initiative, which satisfies their need for purpose. Make them the leader for anything if you want them to buy in. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go back to that little situation that I saw. If I had known, if I were like the teacher or the, daycare worker, and I had known, okay, this kid is choleric, I would probably at the beginning of it, go up to him, set him aside. Because guys, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 kids in your class, right? Or 1 or 2 kids in your family that are choleric. Rarely is it like all 5 of them because it's so rare. So
the powerhouse.
Yeah. So you would go up to them, pull them aside. Hey, I really need your help in taking the lead. And maybe you can be the first person to lead us back into the classroom. What would you think is the best way to do that? Okay, mm-hmm. You've given them that opportunity for them to be that lead, make their own decision. It's a decision that's kind of based within bounds, and it's a decision that's helping you guys as a team work together. Mm-hmm. And they love it.
I like also with that is even if you give that to them and they say, well, no, I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do. I like being able to not to make it about the decision that they're making. Mm-hmm. And so the language I use is, that's not going to be a very helpful decision. That's not going to be a very good decision. Mm-hmm. And here's why. When I can give the consequences of it, that's really important. So mm-hmm. Their superpower is their decisiveness and their will, and being able to kind of hold the decision rather than like what they want, but their decision up to the microscope and say like, this isn't a really good decision. All right. You could make a better decision. Use your decision-making power a little bit better.
Yeah.
Or something like that. That's the invitation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think and that brings us to the next one, which is give them options. This goes for littles, but also teenagers too. So subtly provide explanation as to which option would give them the greatest leverage for success. So when you're giving them those options, like, hey, here's the decision. Either we all go in together and you take the lead, right? Or like you kind of go and round up everybody. I don't know, but it's always these two decisions that actually give them the most leverage for success. So you're not opposing them. You're not even going into that situation thinking this kid's going to give me a hard time. That is where you need to clean up your own thinking and really think about, okay, what actually motivates this child?
So here's the thing with choleric kids though. All right. They're not necessarily, the young ones are not necessarily very reasonable. All right. So you can use all these tactics and make your appeal, and they still don't comply. They still don't use their reason well, or their decisions well. Okay. I like having planned ahead of time what I'm going to do, like where I'm going to insert a little bit of call it an inorganic consequence. Inorganic consequences like timeout, right? Or inorganic consequences, you're going to lose a privilege, or you're going to lose something. Like, it's not necessarily a natural consequence that's going to happen, but I'm going to insert some sort of a pain, right? That's an appropriate level, so that I can properly pair the association of the pain with the action, right?
What does that mean? Yeah, but what does that mean? Can you give me an example?
Okay, so like if the kid still doesn't come inside, I might say something like that. If you continue to do this, I will pick you up and we'll bring you inside. All right, and then you're going to lose, whatever privilege. You're going to lose this, and this is something, especially with teachers. It's not you by yourself. It's you with the parents, right? And having these conversations with them. Yeah, but you're, as the authority figure, you're still responsible for laying down what the boundaries are. That is definitely within your zone of responsibility, putting the clear boundaries in place. So I think enforcing them.
So I can see this kind of playing out, and this works with Avila too, who's not choleric, but it's kind of like, all right, at first you give them two good options. Like, okay, we could do this quickly, or we could take our time, right? I don't know. But ultimately it's the same thing. You could take the lead, or you could be the caboose. Like, that's up to you, right? Yep. So that either way, it's like the end goal is getting them inside. Or if you push back, here's the consequence. Okay. Either way, we're going in, right? So there's that piece. Okay. So I think that actually plays into this one that I added in last minute, but I think this is monumental, especially if you're a phlegmatic parent or a melancholic parent, or somebody who just like my choleric child is always like bulldozing me, but it's show them the results and consequences of their action. Because a lot of parents go, what do I just don't discipline them? No, we're not saying that. But part of the way that, because they're so driven by success and leadership and achieving things, you can have them reflect back on, okay, so here were the actions, here were the consequences of the actions that you took. You said no, and now you're sitting in timeout. Okay, it's like, kind of like, I don't make the rules, even though you do. You're like, but like, look, this is always and be consistent with the consequences. This is where everybody falls short. They are not consistent with the consequences of the kids' actions. If it's like you say no and you go into timeout, whatever. Some people have different things with timeout, but they need to see the consequences of their actions and that consistency.
And honestly, I think most parents are doing that. Yeah. I presume that most parents are already doing that, but I think most parents are not doing is actually appealing to the real desire that they want. What is that value? Whether it's leadership or getting it done efficiently, what is the value that they actually want, so that you can always frame it like, yeah, these are the consequences. And if this is what you really want, what's another way that we can go about it? Or if this is what we really want, this is a better way of going about it. I think that, again, it's shaping the guidance on how they can better use their freedom going forward is an important piece here, and using those things that motivate them, the values that motivate them.
I think it's both and.
That's what I'm saying.
No, but you're saying like, it's never the consequence. Guys, I know, because even
I didn't say that.
Okay, whatever.
It's both and, yes.
Okay, you do. You think it's both and, because I did not hear that.
I think people only give the consequences, but they don't appeal to the motivations.
I see. So you're saying to do both things.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, no, and that's what we're talking about here, is to kind of take it a little bit deeper and not to be like, why are they always difficult? But I want to pause here, because I do think that there are some of those temperament parents who do not do the consequences. And that is going to actually, like, I hate to say it, I don't want to say you're creating a monster. That's not what I'm saying. But
I just did.
But to have that will unchallenged, especially in their formative years, like, that's only going to get worse.
That's going to set up a lot of pain. Yeah.
It's only going to get worse as they get older.
Yeah. So cholerics, we tend to learn by doing.
Yes.
Right. We don't necessarily, like the melancholics, want to be a lot more deeper thinking, calculated before they go out and they step out and do something. Cholerics are just like, let's go. And so think of it as when they're acting out, they're just testing. It's a big experiment that they're doing, and they need to understand where the boundaries are. They're trying to figure out those things. And so they don't necessarily default, unless they have like a strong melancholic secondary, they don't necessarily default to evaluating their actions retroactively. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where we can really show up and help them to do that, so that we can recognize, hey, you're trying to learn something, you're testing something out, but we have to actually walk them through, jumpstart their logic, walk them through the consequences, so they can actually capitalize on that acting out learning event that didn't really go the way that they wanted to. And make better decisions going forward. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's also like, take that time when they do make the right decision, or just a better decision that like actually help them get to success and efficiency quicker, to pause and say that to them. I was coaching a parent I think she's like phlegmatic melancholic, and she has a choleric child, and had that very same thought. Why does this always have to be a fight? And I started to kind of like reframe, okay, well, what is like good about this child? Like, first of all, they'll never be brainwashed. Yay. They'll probably always take the lead. And there's a responsibility to actually form this stallion of a child, like there's a major responsibility as a parent. And I think that's actually really important for people to know that. But I also said, just start practicing when you're noticing them, they're in the corner, and start asking them like, hey, so-and-so, can you help me make a decision on something? And this is not like pandering, like literally it's like, hey, can you help me make a decision on something? What would you suggest to your little brother to do, this or this, right? And that's just helping them form these other skills of leadership and decision making. And one thing that we tried with Avila, once again, she's not choleric, but she really loves it. And I think this is her melancholic side that loves it. We would start playing. Do you guys remember that game from the 80s, Scruples?
No.
Where it would be like, you'd give a situation and be like, what decision would you make? And it was like trying to figure out, it was like kind of like a Catholic Christian game. And it was like helping people make prudent decisions. Like, what a dorky game.
We reinvented it at our house, and it was kind
of like brilliant though, because we totally played it. And it was like, what decision would you make if this or this? And this is just a way of helping them live into their genius a little bit more. And it kind of starts to direct their will to a more productive end. If a kid is like kind of being resistant, that's just telling you, okay, maybe they don't have enough options or enough opportunities to make decisions for themselves. So you can lay those out for them. And it could it's a decision. It's not like, hey, decide like where you're going to college. It's a decision that is appropriate for their age, If they are older, you could be like, hey, okay, so here are a couple of colleges that are options for us. I would love for you to do some research, like which one, like, these are all the qualities over here at this college. These are like, you get to make the decision. That's not like, that's actually allowing them to step into their genius more.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's always exercising will that's appropriate to the age level, appropriate to the level of agency that they have, the informed conscience at that point in their life.
Yes.
all that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Also, this final one is teach them empathy, encourage them to consider others' feelings and collaborate in a team setting. Do you have anything to add to that one?
It's just as somebody that's like low empathy, I don't necessarily go here naturally, right? And so this is like a skill that I've had to, learn. It's just like, okay, like when somebody does something, you actually and they do something well, like actually go out of your way to tell them good job, or even tell them thank you. Don't just presume that it's like everybody operates from the same sense of duty that you have as a choleric. But even if they do, like acknowledge them. I remember in the military, sitting down with my first sergeant and him being like, Matt, have you given anybody any sort of rewards? And I was just like, what do you mean? Like nobody's done anything meritorious of an award. He goes, have they done their job? And I said, a couple of them have. He goes, give them a reward. Like there's even doing that, meeting the standard is something that's meritorious. And so just exercise for the clerics, just exercising the encouragement muscle.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think that's helpful.
When we were talking about this with the group, the parents from Donahue, the school, there were a couple people kind of stepping in and saying like, oh yeah, like here's an example of like my teenage son, just reminding him like, hey, did you say thank you to blank?
This person that showed up at your game?
Right. Like did you say something to them? Because I think because of that natural leadership of a choleric too, like it means a lot to people. Or
the natural sense of responsibility. So
yes.
Like, yeah, of course they would do that thing. Like, but why do they need to thank you? It's just, again.
Well, I'm saying from the being on the receiving end, it means a lot to receive that from people. And also, if you're on a team with people, it gets buy-in from others, right? Like people are like, yeah, let's go. Like, I like working with you and you being the leader of this team. Like it actually motivates others to actually receive some type of reward, whether that be an affirmation. So to kind of bring this whole thing back, how would I have responded? Okay, no, I think we already spoke about that. But yes, okay, so a couple takeaways from this. Be mindful, do your own thought work on your beliefs about your child. They're not trying to be difficult. They are growing in their will. It's very raw talent that they are like trying to form, and they need you to help them, especially when they're young.
And if you're not regulated, you can't.
Exactly. And I want to just say, with all of these extra resources, it's not worth diving into these resources if you don't have guidance and help. We have our online community. We have tons of coaches that you can come and get coached. Like how many times? Like even if you join us for a month, you could get so much free coaching on these particular things, coaching your thoughts about your children. If you're struggling with that, come sign up for our academy. That's super helpful. But a couple other takeaways. So reframe your own thinking, give them challenges, give them options, allow them to live in their values, teach them empathy, channel their will, and then show them their results. Show them the consequences of their actions and be consistent with boundaries.
Got it. So there you have it, folks. The values, the do's and don'ts of parenting a choleric child, or being a formator, a teacher, if you would, of a choleric child. We're going to be jumping into the next do's and don'ts, series of do's and don'ts for all the other temperaments. So make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.
And share this with some of your friends.
Hooray!
Bye.
See you guys. Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.